Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Eric Coleman with Rommana Software and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, Feature-Based Project Management for Agile and Non-Agile Projects by Dr. Magdy Hanna. We're excited you're able to join us today. Set aside an hour to attend this webinar. This webinar is sponsored by Rommana Software, the leader in application lifecycle management technology. For more information on how Rommana ALM can help you or your organization, please visit rommanasoftware.com. You may submit your questions at any time during this webinar using your question box in your GoToWebinar window. Today's presenter will answer as many questions within the time allowed at the end of today's session. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing within 48 hours at rommanasoftware.com. At the end of today's webinar, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. At Rommana Software, where we strive to provide the highest quality educational resources for the public, and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete this short survey. I will now turn the webinar over to today's presenter, Dr. Magdy Hanna. Dr. Hanna?
Yes, Eric, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining me from. I'm pleased to spend the next hour or so with you to share with you what I have been practicing and teaching people around the globe as far as project management. When I say project management here, that applies to the development project management as well as the test project management. You know by now, if you are a part of a test team or you are a test manager or a test lead, the test project itself is a project in its own with everything else that applies to any project. The approach that I'm going to share with you has been supported by Rommana ALM. Rommana ALM is a complete application lifecycle management system that has everything you can imagine, and that's supposed to be supported by an ALM, and part of that is a project management piece. So although Rommana has user stories, requirement management, it has test management and so on, use cases, documents, collaboration, but it has a project management component that oversees all that. And the project management component uses the feature-based project management, which is very different from what a tool like Microsoft Project uses, which I refer to as task-oriented project management. It is very critical that when we manage projects, whether those projects are development or testing or any other kind of projects, it's very critical that we manage those projects in terms of the features or the requirements or the user stories that we are implementing in that project. Well, just from the beginning here, I want to tell you that when I use the word the feature here, that's a generic term to either mean a requirement or user story. So it doesn't matter. So if you're working on an agile project where you're using user stories, you can remove the word feature, replace it by the word user story. The same is true if your project is not agile and you are dealing with requirements. You can apply the same thing to requirements. All right. So I don't know if I need to spend any time to explain to you why we need to focus on features or requirements or user stories. I mean, think about it. In any project you do, features or user stories or requirements are what we are delivering to the customer. They are the only thing in our project. I mean, your customer does not care about you, does not care about your project manager, your team does not care about what tools you use. They don't care about what techniques or method you use. All what they care two things is the features they are getting, and not only that, but also how soon are they getting it. And of course, the quality of the implementation of those features. That's why it's very important to manage our projects in terms of features. Remember, when we spend time on any project, that time we spend is going towards implementing features. When we say implementing features, either designing them, coding them, testing them, doing anything with the features. So features within a project are really what takes our time. Okay, so when we assign budget, we should be talking about budget as it relates to specific features. Now, we will see in a little bit that there are things in the project that are not tied to features, and those are what I refer to as the project level tasks. So every task we do, just think about it, everything you do in a project is tied to a feature or features or requirements or user stories. All right, whether you're doing user story analysis, you're doing a user story meeting, you're doing requirement reviews, you're doing high-level design, low-level design, you're doing coding, you're doing test design, all these refers to or are related to features or user stories or requirements. However, there are certain tasks that are project level, things like preparing the build, for example. That's not for a specific feature. And I'm taking care of those two in this approach. Even when we speak about risk, I mean, people speak about project risks all the time. I say that's great because every project has risks associated with it. However, the majority of the risks, if you think about it carefully, they apply to a specific feature. They affect specific features. They affect the delivery of those features, okay? And it would become useful when we speak about a risk within a project. We also speak about which feature or which deliverable may be hindered or affected by that risk. Because if we're going to think about some risk mitigation strategy, we need to find out if it is even worth doing that or not, because if the risk is affecting one small feature that the customer didn't even care much about it, then we don't have to worry about the risk so much, right? Because to me, how important the risk is will very much depends on the consequences of that risk. And if I have a risk, for example, such as a third-party component that we may be acquiring is not available from the third party, all right, sure, that's a risk. How important that risk is? It is as important as the feature that will use that third-party component, right? You agree? And if we were doing this feature as bells and whistles to make the screen looks nice, well, then that risk is no big deal. That's really where I'm coming from. Because someone, while doing the design, at some point decided that we're going to do something in a certain way. And then later on in the project, we find out that we cannot do it this way. And we forget completely that there is a design alternative. And we get hung up on that risk as if we don't get that third party component or that's a packaged component, then we're not going to put the release out. That does not make any sense. All right. As you probably know very well, when changes happen, when the customer changes their mind, or when the customer submits a form of a change request or any change in the user story, you know very well that other features and the other user stories will also be impacted by the change. Okay. And of course, the biggest thing about features or user stories or requirements, they change over time, whether they are within the course of the project or even after release. I still have to keep track of which requirement or which user story have changed over time. The picture you see in front of you shows to me what is related to a feature or a requirement or a user story. Let's think about it in your project, in your very simple Agile project. If you have a user story here in the middle, and as I said, A feature could mean just a user story, or a bunch of user stories, or a big requirement. Okay? So everything we do is related to something, to a user story or a feature. From a project management perspective, we have the time estimates, we have the resource allocation, we need to decide who is doing what. We keep track of all the risks we have as it relates to specific user story or a requirement. We have the tasks we perform, such as, early design, high-level design, low-level design, coding, unit testing, and so on, and test the design. The timeline should always be done in terms of the feature. If you look at the timeline in Microsoft project, I always ask people, says, where are your requirements? Where are your user stories in the timeline? They're not there. Why aren't these there? Because Microsoft project is not a requirement to management or user story management software. It is simply a project management software that allows you to manage your projects in terms of tasks and resources. Even when we speak about progress, you want to be able to track progress feature by feature. All right. Otherwise, what am I tracking progress for? I have a project that has 10, 15 new features and 5 or 15 or 20 bug fixes. Don't I want to know at any point of time how far are we in each one of those? Even the only status or the only progress you keep is done or not done. At the very least, you want to know, is it done? It's not done. And which ones were done, which ones are not done. Of course, in Agile projects, if you are using burn down a chart, it shows you for each user story, is it done or not? But what happens while you are working on it? If you are going to simplify the implementation of a requirement or a user story down to just done or not done, that's fine. But keep in mind, if it is not done, how far are we in it? Have we designed it? Have we made the changes to the database that will allow us to implement that feature? Because the changes to the database, believe it or not, and if you are a developer, you know that, the changes you have to make to the database to implement a given feature might be the largest task in the process of implementing the change. Let alone designing the user interface for that feature is another big task. Then writing the code is another task. Then doing some unit testing is another task. And then testing it on the system level is another task, and so on. And what I mean by progress here, the progress of each task as it relates to a given feature. Now, of course, every time I make this presentation or I write something about this approach on LinkedIn or whatever, I get attacked by some Agile people who really are using Agile as an excuse to do a sloppy job. And they tell me that, oh, we don't keep track of anything in Agile projects, and they accuse me of not understanding the Agile process and the Agile framework. This is, in Agile, we don't do any of this. We don't allocate resources. We don't keep track of the risks. We don't do timeline. We don't do tasks. Someone grabs a user story and works on it. And when he or she is done, they say, I'm done. I don't know if I want to work on a project like that. Where is the project management discipline that we learned over the years? Now, of course, those people, honestly speaking, with all due respect to them, I ignore them, because those are not the project managers that I want to deal with. Okay? Now, again, if you have a different opinion, please share it with me, because that's very important, though. If we don't have time to discuss it here, please go ahead and send me an email. Yes, Agile is supposed to be flexible. It's supposed to allow us to do things faster, but it doesn't mean that we don't have discipline. I've been teaching people for many years. Disciplined Agile, no ad hoc Agile, and no sloppy Agile. I should never generalize because, as I said earlier, only some people try to do ad hoc / sloppy Agile. But the majority of people I know follow very good discipline when they do Agile. Okay, when it comes to testing, for example, because I know the majority of my audience today are in the test profession, so there's a lot of things we build as part of the test process, and they're all related to a feature. Whether you build the scenarios, you build them for a feature, you build acceptance criteria, you build them for a user story, or you could even build them for a requirement if that's what you want. You have test cases, you have scripts, you have bug reports, all the other kind of things that we build in the test process, and you may have other things you build in your own test process, but when I listed those things, I am considering the test process that I follow in my projects. Okay, in the development areas, it's the data test tables we build or we modify for a given feature or a user story. Any design component, whether it is a piece of software, a piece of user interface or a screen or otherwise, the acceptance criteria are here, which is also here, become important for developers. Okay, the code components, the code we write for the user story or for the feature, the screen layout and the screen design is part of it, and there might be other things too. And these are some other things that applies to all the three disciplines. It's important for project management, important for testing, and they are also important for development. Like if you're building use cases, for example, and use cases relate to the user story or the requirement you're working with. If you're building any design model such as activity diagram, such as decision tables, state models, any one of those things, and any other document that you might be building. Even, believe it or not, when you review your review notes, when I say review notes here, I mean the discussions that happen as they relate to user story or a requirement. In a project, you need to keep track of these things because 6 months later or 1 year later, if someone questions or has any question about a user story or requirement, we need to be able to go back to all the review notes that we have documented when we were reviewing this user story or when we were reviewing this requirement. That's why an ALM tool needs to support all that. People misunderstand the meaning of application lifecycle management. That's why I started to use the term integrated application lifecycle management. It's one tool that has all the pieces integrated that help you keep track of all these things in the same tool. Now, keep in mind, I'm not trying to promote the tool, the Rommana tool by itself. I'm trying to promote a discipline. And I don't care if you follow this discipline using Rommana or any other tool. Okay, because some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about, you can actually do it in Excel, and I'm okay with that. And actually, I will show you how to do some of these things in Excel. Here are some of the things I just mentioned about what it means to manage your project with features or requirements or user stories in mind. Some of the things that I referred to, when you manage risks, for example, throughout the project, you manage it for both the development and testing for each feature or each user story. So whether the risk is related to our development effort or our testing effort, you need to relate a risk to a specific feature. You need to speak about actions, and there's action items. I know in every project there are action items, but those action items relate to some user stories or some requirements. They're not just general action items. Okay, they're just related to user stories. So we have to have those actions documented. So if I have an action item that I need to perform, I need to find out, and action items are different from tasks, by the way. Project tasks are up here. Project tasks are typical things like development, like design, unit testing, test design, building scenarios, executing the tests. All these things are typical project tasks. But actions are something different. Like, for example, install the third-party component, install a tool, and those may or may not apply to action to specific features. Okay. I'm going to skip over this. Those slides simply list all the kind of things that you could do within the project with features in mind. All the development activities you want to manage in terms of features. Have we designed? Have we finished our database design? Yes. For which feature? Okay. Even if there is an issue or a bug report or anything, yes, we have a bug report. But what feature or what user story that bug report or issue is related to? Okay. We received a change request to make some changes. Which requirements or which user stories this change relate to, and so on. When things change and we try to look at the impact of changes on the schedule and on the cost, all right, which feature, which user story gets impacted, because there might be some features that are going to fall behind the schedule because of certain change that happened to another feature. Let's get into the meat here. What you see in front of you here is simply a practice of keeping a track of each task we do in the course of a project and how many hours we have estimated for that task and how many actual hours we spent doing that task. And of course, from these two, we calculate the percentage of deviation. So if a given task, whatever the task is, we estimated 10 hours, okay, and we actually only spend 8 hours, then the percentage of deviation is what we say minus 20%. Minus 20% means that you performed the task in 20% less than what you estimated. If you actually spend 12 hours while you have estimated 10 hours, then the deviation is positive 20%, meaning that you actually needed more time, which means initially you underestimated the task. Now, I refer to this as minimal practice. This is the kind of thing that I did about 35 years ago when I started to develop software. Okay, long time. And I wonder sometimes, do we even do this? By the way, this is, if you look at the CMM and CMMI, this is below level 1. Like if you're not doing this kind of thing, you're not even level 1. So I wonder if any one of us here with me today are doing any of this. And remember, a task here is anything you're doing, whether it is designing tests, executing tests, writing test cases, reviewing test cases, writing code, designing the user interface. And I'm not talking about specific features here. Do we even keep track of how many hours we think it's going to take and how many hours we actually took? Because estimation is important, because we want to be able to learn from our own estimates over time. If I'm always underestimating, then I have to adjust my way of estimating things. I'd like to get to see a show of hands. A show of hand. How many of you here can say, yes, we are keeping a track of our estimate for each task we do, and also we keep, let's first say, yes, we keep track of our estimates. We estimate how much time is going to take us every one of the tasks we are doing. Please, if you do, go ahead and raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6. That's about 20% of my attendees here. And the rest of us either don't know or not doing it. Let me tell you something. If I bring, I'm not going to say bring a contractor to work on my house. Honestly, if I bring a handyman to come and do something in my backyard, just imagine how primitive it is. And I ask him to do this and this and this and that. In the and I'm trying to ask him how much he's going to charge me. Don't you think that he is going to estimate how much time he has to spend? I just did this last week. Okay? So he sits there, he stands there, and he looks at what he needs to do, and he says, okay, that's going to take me what? 8 hours or 16 hours or 24 hours, because he needs to know how many days he's going to spend on site. And he says, okay, that's going to take me, that's going to cost you whatever, $300. And if I say, why? He says, because that's going to take me 3 days. And my day is $100. Right? I mean, am I telling you something you don't already know? And of course, by the end of the project, he needs to go back and say, did I estimate this job correctly? Because what if he had to spend 4 days, not 3 days? Then he knows that he underestimated. Okay, he knows he underestimated. So that's what simple-minded people do. How come we don't do this as professionals? That's the minimal you have to do. All right, let's go beyond the minimal. Now I'm talking about the same thing, but now divided by feature or requirement or something you're going to do. One more time. This time I'm not bringing a handyman to do work in my backyard. This time I am bringing a contractor to do a swimming pool in my backyard. Okay. That swimming pool has a number of what? A number of features. So, or if you are willing to put the whole swimming pool as one feature or one requirement, the contractor knows that he has to do certain tasks. He has to dig the ground. They have to do something to prepare the ground. He has to put the pumps. He has to put the motors. He has to put the lights. So every one of those tasks, he will be estimating how many hours each one of the tasks is doing. And with the same token, he's going to be going and keeping a track of the actual number of hours, because that kind of project might take them, what, 2 months or 3 months or maybe 1 month to do. So he wants to know at the end of the project, has he underestimated or overestimated? And he puts his own cost here. And he says, that's how much it's going to cost. Okay. Now, it is possible that he underestimated things and things would cost more or less. I don't know. And in total, for this feature, for example, it was underestimated because we estimated 104 hours, but we actually spent 107 hours. But it doesn't mean that we have underestimated every single task. You know that, okay? Yes, we underestimated this task here, but we overestimated this task here because we estimated 35 hours, we spent only 30 hours, okay? But that's by task. And as you see, those are the tasks within a project. Those are development tasks, but maybe in the test side, in the test process, you have tasks such as reviewing the requirement, right? Building scenarios, building acceptance criteria, writing test cases, reviewing the test cases, executing the test cases. These are the typical tasks within a test process. So what I am asking for here is that, are we keeping a track? Are we keeping a track of our estimates for each requirement or each feature per task or not? Again, if you are doing this, please go ahead and raise your hand. And I will count. I'm assuming the number would be less than the number that indicated that they were doing the minimal practice. So, because this is doing the same thing, but without features. This is just the total. This is the whole task of test design. This is the whole task of test execution, regardless of which requirement or which user story. This one now is doing it per requirement, such that you know for one requirement, you know, here are your estimates. For the other requirement, here are your estimates, and so on. And at the end, here is the total for the whole, for all the features included in a release or in an iteration or a sprint. So we actually here we actually underestimated by 4%. You see that? We underestimated by, I'm sorry, we underestimated by 4% because we estimated 807 hours, but we spent actually 842 hours. Okay. So let me count here. Now, of course, I'm open if you're willing to challenge me. Now I have also 5 or 6 people. The same count that say they're doing the previous practice. I'm willing here that you challenge me and you say, Magdy, we're not doing this, but it is not important. This is not important. Please, that's important. That's what I want you to share with me. Because those of you who did not raise their hands, one of two things. Either you don't believe it is important for a project to do this, or you know it is important, but you just never got around to do it. You don't have time, your team does not have the discipline to do it, or whatever. Or your process does not allow you to do it. So that's what I'm coming to say. If you believe that this is a waste of time, because again, one more time, I'm going to tell you this. Some few agile people tell me that we don't need this. For an agile project, you don't need this. I say, my God. For an agile project, you need this more than in a non-agile project. Because agile projects go much faster. You only have 2 or 3 weeks to deliver something to the test team. And the test team might have only 1 week to deliver something to the customer, whatever. When the time is shorter, you need to keep track of things. Otherwise, you will run completely out of time before you know it. Again, I would love to have a discussion with anyone who would say, this is not important, this is irrelevant, this is a waste of time, this is an overkill. All right. And if so, go ahead and share this with me through the questions tab. Click on the questions tab. Jill, I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer your question regarding the hands up or the hands down. Forgive me. I think when it is green, that means that your hands are raised. See, I am on the other side. I cannot raise my hand, so I don't know how it looks. My apology. And I hear from Jean here says, this is important to do, but management does not do it. Of course, Harry says, since it is Agile project, we track at the user story level as it is a collective effort of the team. I agree with you 100%. You do this at the user story level, but what I'm interested in is to know, do you think it makes sense to keep track of these things for a user story? Miss or Mr. Anderson, because he did not put your first name. You say, I'm happy to have the Agile discussion with you. We can do this any way you want, perhaps over the phone or over email. So let's start with the email, and we can, and if we feel that we need to have a telephone conversation, we will. So my email is mhanna@rommanasoftware.com. mhanna, or even send it to info@rommanasoftware.com, and it will reach me. Send me an email, and then we can discuss there. Thanks so much. Then I'm gonna just not read your, okay, you have a comment here, it says test acceptance criteria is captured from product owner for each feature. Whether a business feature or an atomic level, it is then determined how we test and whom to add weight points. Okay, I get what you're saying. The only thing I'm not happy with is that you're telling me that the acceptance criteria is captured from the product owner, which means in your project, it is the product owner who builds the acceptance criteria. Well, that's your practice, that's your project, but if you ask me if I'm running an Agile project, do I want the product owner to write the acceptance criteria? And my answer would be absolutely not. I want the acceptance criteria to be written and reviewed by developers, by testers, by everyone. Maybe the starting point is done by the product owner, but let's not discuss the Agile practice here, because every Agile project does the job in their own way. So let's continue our discussion through email, please. All right. Move on, because I know in this presentation I always run out of time. Eric warned me before I started. This is another practice where you keep track of who is doing what, or actually explicitly who is performing which task on which feature. You see that? So if I have tasks like analysis, design, coding, test design, test execution, whatever, so different people are performing different tasks for different features. Now again, people tell me on an Agile project, someone grabs a user story and work on it. When he's done, he's done. I said, really? One person does everything about the user story? I don't know how. Honestly, I'm not that jack of all trades that takes a user story and design the database or make changes to the database design and design the user interface and write the code and do the unit testing and everything, even system level testing, and I say I'm done. When I'm done, I'm done. That does not make any sense. No one can tell me that one person is assigned to a user story. So which means we don't have those tasks there, because all tasks are one task. Or maybe you have two tasks. One of them is development and the other one is testing. And I'm willing to accept this in some small projects that have small user stories, that one person is doing all the development tasks and another person is doing all the testing tasks. But yet, There are 2 tasks at least. Okay. So I'm willing to admit that this makes a little bit more sense in a non-agile project. But for an agile project, at least we need to know who's doing the development, who's doing the testing. That's just for resource allocation or work assignment. Now the duration is important. Okay, I am working on this user story. From when to when? Oh, from today until tomorrow? Or from today until 3 days from now? Someone else is doing something with the same user story. Like hopefully, when I am doing the user interface design and some design things for that user story, hopefully at the same time, someone else is writing the scenarios or reviewing the acceptance criteria or even writing the test cases. All right. So the start and end date here overlap between tests, between features, and that feeds into your timeline. That will show you something like that. This is my timeline, which I'm going to show to you in Rommana itself as a tool. What you're looking at is an actual timeline graph or chart from Rommana. Features are here, or user stories, or requirements, whatever. But it shows here, it shows here each task. So prototyping of this feature is from this date all the way to this date. It's taking 4 days. Okay, now once we're done with this, for the same feature, by the way, we're going to be writing the code, and it's taking 3 other days. Imagine concurrently, I have a meeting that has to do with this feature. Remember, the fact that the meeting is here on June 17. It means that this meeting is a task. It is a task to talk about this feature. Maybe that meeting is about discussing the prototype. And I have 1 day left here. So I start the prototyping here and here. On the 3rd day, we have a meeting. We discuss the prototype, and then I continue to work on the prototype. And by the 4th day, I'm done with my prototype, considering all the feedback I received in this meeting, and then the coding will start. Now, of course, does this mean that it's only one person who's doing this? Absolutely not. When you see the live timeline, you're going to see that any one of those tasks could be performed. So the prototyping could be done by one person, the coding could be done by a different person. We will see this in a little bit, and so on. All right. For this feature, I'm only showing tested design here. Of course, there are other tasks that are happening probably at the same time for this feature, which is user interface design, writing the code, doing unit testing, whatever. But concurrently, I am doing tested design. So this is, by the way, someone says, oh my God, we're going to keep track of all this? This is the point. You don't. If you have a tool, the work is minimal. The work is minimal. All what you have to do is say, okay, this feature is assigned to this person, this person, and this person. This person will do this person will do this, and so on. And it happens during the project, the course of the project management, and the tool keeps track of things. So that's a timeline. Okay. This is now from the testing side. I refer to this as the test coverage report. And this is simply saying requirements or user stories are here. How many total tests we have? How many have been pre-designed? How many have been done as ad hoc or exploratory testing? Because people are going to do exploratory testing, okay? Those of you who attended my courses on software testing know that I'm very big at positive versus negative testing. So I tell people to tell me how many of those test cases are positive, how many of them are negative. And then you keep track of how many passed, how many failed, how many yet to be executed. Based on these two numbers, you can calculate the percentage of completion, which means have we done? Like here, for example, we have a total of 45 test cases, right? We executed all of them. 40 passed, 5 failed. Nothing left to be executed. That's why the completion is 100%. However, the readiness or acceptance is only 88.9%. Why? Because of those 5 that failed. Okay, 5 out of the 45. If you take the 5, divided by the 45, it gives you the difference. Or if you take, in a different way, if you take the 40 that passed, divide them by the 45, it gives you this number, 88.9%. Which means, although we completed all the test cases for this feature, but that feature is only 88.9% already. Sorry, forgive me. My mouse is funny every time I click it. Okay, so here is the readiness percentage of every feature or every user story on the sprint, and here is the total, 71%. At any given point of time, I should know. I should be able to say, how ready are we? Well, again, whether it is a non-agile release or it is an agile sprint or an iteration, it doesn't matter. You have a bunch of requirements or a bunch of user stories, and at any given point of time, you want to see these numbers. This is an actual report that comes out of Rommana, and I'll show it to you. Let me, since I only have about 14 minutes left, I'm going to show you some of these things live. Okay. Rommana has been selected to be the best ALM tool, and this study was done by RQX Global, which is an independent reviewer or independent review company or independent research company, and has awarded Rommana these 3 things. And the score that Rommana has received is the highest score amongst 33 different tools. I just wanted to let you know that. That's a good news for us. Rommana got 7.1 score. The only other tool that was close, but close only in the requirement management component, is Blueprint, which again, you don't hear about it very often. But you can imagine all the things that are known, from doors to quality center to other tools here. Spira test is here. Spira test got only what, 4.1%. I can't remember. I don't see JERA here. It was not in that study. But again, this study has been published. If you want to read the report is available from RQX Global, but there is also a copy of it is available on our website. But we'll leave this for now, and I'll take you directly to the Rommana login. Rommana is available. I mean, you can try it certainly for free, like any other package. But we have reduced the prices, not reduced by initially Rommana was being sold all as one piece, all the components together. But realizing that some customers telling us that they don't use everything in it. So as a result, we broke it down. You can buy it in packages. If all what you do is user stories and requirements and the change management, and you do the collaboration to keep track of those, then it's $15 a month per person. If you want to do the requirement management and the test management, it's $25 a month. If you want to add to it the issue management, which has to do with bug tracking and so on. So it's cumulative. You can choose a package now, and you can keep building up. The whole Rommana package, it has everything together, is $50 per user per month, if you think you're going to use all of it. But you don't have to. You can buy any one of the packages and spend only that much money. And after 6 months, after a year, if you think that you want to add more components to it, you can add this. All on the fly, all available online. It's a matter of click and purchase, and it's available either in the cloud as subscription, or you can purchase the tool to install it on your servers. Okay, let's move on because that seems to be a sales pitch to me. Let me go here. This is what we call the portfolio screen within Rommana. The portfolio screen will show you all the systems, all the products we have, and for every product it has all the projects. I have a project here called the Rommana ALM, not a project, forgive me, a product. These are actually, this is a snapshot of the actual Rommana projects over time. So this is, for example, release 10.3, which happened back in 2010. This is a new release, 17.3. This is, and so on. So let me open any one of those projects. So I'm gonna open this project. Let me log in. I'm gonna log in as a project manager or a product owner. All right, and once you log into a project, the first thing you see is a project dashboard, which you configure any way you want. You decide on what charts and what statistics you want to see here. Just simply by clicking configure dashboard, and you are able to add or remove some of these widgets, okay? Charts, tables, whatever. So that's a and you can design this your own. Everyone can design this to see the things that are more critical. As a test manager, for example, I want to see my test execution by status. Once I open the project, I want to see that I have I have that many number of features that fail, that pass. This is 11.6% failed, 7.2% have not been executed yet, and so on. All right, so move from there because I don't have much time. I have 9 minutes left. I'm going to take you directly to the reports. And the reports are simply based on what data we entered. I'm going to focus, since this presentation is about project management, so I'm going to focus on some of the reports here. But there is reports that has to do with test management. There are some reports for requirement management, user stories, and so on. So here are some of the interesting things. I will start with cost estimation by requirement. No filters. Let's just go on to get the report. And this is a very simple. This is a user story or the requirement right here. And here are the different tasks I am performing on this user story. And as we said earlier, here are the estimated number of hours, the actual number of hours, the estimated cost, which of course depends on the hourly rate of each one of those people who are going to be, of course, I can click on any one of those tasks and find more details, find out who is doing it and what is their hourly rate. That's, of course, if your hourly rate is going to be important. If you put the hourly rate is $1 for each person, for all people, for everyone, then the dollar amount here is going to be equal to your number of hours. So you can tell here the hourly rate of the person performing this task is $100 an hour. This is just numbers for testing, okay? These are not real data. And at the end, it shows that we had overestimated this task for this user story by 25%, because we had estimated 8 hours, but we actually only spent 6 hours. Okay. This one here, we have also overestimated by 20 hours. That's why it's minus 50%. Okay, so that's the task, that's the cost per feature. Okay. So I go back here to reports. Let's go to you can see the same data, but in a different way. This is the cost by task. Now, these on the left here, and instead of having the features, I have the tasks. It's just doing a pivot of that table. Okay. So let me take another useful report here for you, so let's look at the timeline, project timeline, which, as I said, very different from what you'd see from something like Microsoft Project. It's still transferring data. There's a huge amount of data. Okay, as I said, timeline is always done in terms of features, or user stories. And here, the nice thing about reports in Rommana, everything is a link. If someone is looking here and say, what is that? What is this more attributes for issue report version, and this version 1 of the requirement? When you put your mouse on the pointer on the requirement, it gives you some details, but you can get even more details. It gives you the priority, the status, the release it is planned for, which iteration or sprint it is assigned to, and this is version 1. Okay, but I could certainly click on it like that, and it tells me that, do you want to show the requirement details, or do you want to associate a task to? I say, show me the requirement details, and now look what it does. It opens the requirements or the user story in a separate screen. Okay, and I can see everything about the detail if I want to recall anything about this. So here is the actual requirement screen. And if this was an Agile project, that would have been the user story screen. And it's highlighting that requirement here and giving me all details here, which I'm not going to go through it now because this presentation is not about requirements or user stories. But for now, I'm going to close it. Just telling you that from the timeline, you can see the details. How could possibly Microsoft Project do this for you? It can't. Now, on the right-hand side here, there are all the tasks. And this is probably the same kind of report I showed you in an image before on the slide. The same thing here. You see that? The prototyping is starting here on June 15, finishing on June 18. But now if I put the cursor here on the task, it tells me this task, the prototyping task, has been assigned to 3 people with a total estimated hours of 40 hours. They spend 20 hours to do it. And it shows you the meeting here is going to be only Jane going to be doing that meeting. Of course, it doesn't make sense because I should have listed here the customer or someone else who was going to be there in that meeting. But again, this is just showing you that you can put the cursor on any task and you can see the details of the task, how many hours total it is, and so on. Now, of course, someone says, oh, how come Jane is spending 10 hours on this task over 4 days? Yeah, because Jane is doing other things. So if I probably click on another task here, Jane is also involved here for another 10 hours. And she might be also here. Did not assign her hours yet, and so on. So this is how the timeline should look. Now remember, these are all the things related to what? To features or user stories on the left here. But as I told you before, there are certain things that are what I call project level tasks. I have a project level task here, called create the build. So here is system level testing here, and here is the rollout. I just put those for testing purposes, okay? And for each one of those tasks, those are not related to a specific requirement or a feature or a user story. They are project level tasks, and every task has people assigned to it and so on. In the interest of time, I'm going to have to stop here and ask if there is any question here. So I'm going to go back to my presentation and see if I have any questions I need to answer. Of course, Arun is asking me about the difference between Jira and Rommana. You can imagine that there is no way that I could answer this question here. But the only thing I'm going to say, the difference is huge. Rommana is by no means an ALM. Okay, it does not tie all the pieces together. Rommana, Jira, did I say Rommana? Jira is not an ALM. Jira does not tie the pieces together. Jira was started as an issue management report. Now, people started to use Jira for everything at the same time. Okay, there's so much to say about the difference, Arun. I know Jira seems to be the de facto standard. Everyone wants a tool, you go for Jira. Marketing is everything. Marketing is everything. People go for Jira because everyone is using Jira. It's like people go for IBM because everyone is using IBM. I have customers using Jira for years, and they come to me and says, we don't get any of this in Jira. Okay, so I would not even speak of Jira as an ALM tool. Okay. All right, let me continue reading here. Can we get earned value analysis from the tool? Harry, no, I'm sorry. The tool does not do earned value analysis, and that's probably my fault being the product owner of this tool, because I have not thought of earned value analysis. But I will have to think about this, but as it is now, you don't get earned value analysis there. John is asking, can you drill on or report on total time estimated allocated to resource per sprint, per person? Do I have that report? No, the answer is no. I'm not gonna lie to you. You can only know, but the data is there. The nice thing about reporting is that, of course, you have the built-in report. You have the custom reports, which you can build any report you want. So my quick answer to you, you can certainly build the custom report that says, okay, I want to know the estimated and time allocated per person throughout the term of the sprint. And you can build that. It's not one of the canned reports, but you can build a custom reports. Jill coming back to say the criticality was showing when I was showing the requirement that had the various level of criticality. My question is whether the readiness report, it takes the criticality in account. The answer is no. The readiness report is mainly based on how many test cases we have, how many passed, how many failed. And we already, the readiness is calculated simply by dividing the number of passed test cases by the total number. Now, if someone says, okay, we're already only 89%, okay, so which means there's 5 test cases that failed. They have to go and look at the 5 test cases and see if there is any one of them are critical or not. But the criticality, because really the software has no way of knowing how critical it is and to consider this in calculating the readiness. All right, I don't see any more questions to answer. However, please feel free to send any question to info@rommanasoftware.com or mhanna@rommanasoftware.com. Thank you so much for your time. I have taken 5 minutes beyond my time here, and I will look forward to some of the questions. And Miss or Mr. Anderson, again, as I said, I don't have your first name. Please go ahead and send me your first message regarding the discussion between Agile and non-Agile and how all this relates to Agile or not, and we can start discussion. Thank you all for spending the time with me, and I'll leave the webinar to Eric.
Thank you, Dr. Hanna, for your time today, and I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's free webinar sponsored by Rommana Software, the leader in application lifecycle management technology. For more information on how Rommana ALM can help you or your organization, please visit rommanasoftware.com. You can follow Rommana Software on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube to find out more information about Rommana news, events, and promotions. Thank you all again for joining us, and have a great day. Thank you again, Dr. Hanna.
Thank you, Eric.